Well, good morning, everyone. So I am Ashtelle. This is Channa.
Hello, everyone.
That introduction is making me very nervous. I don't know why everybody's anticipating this presentation. But we must say that the crusade against dirty money is still on in earnest in our country. And that crusade cannot be successful without the three important C's: communication, collaboration, and cooperation. We're one community and all of us are responsible. Now, this case was actually, the successful conviction of this case would not have been possible without those three C's. Now, I will only be focusing mainly on the collaboration aspect. Ms. Ormsby, who was the lead prosecutor in that particular matter, will be delving more into the prosecution of the matter, and who better to do so than her. Now, how did it start in the first place? Mocha received an anonymous tip questioning the growth and wealth and lavish lifestyle of Mr. Elliott. Now, when Mocha received this tip, there was now a joint operation involving three agencies. And this is what we're talking about with the three C's now: Mocha, FID, and the Office of the Contractor General. Now, all these entities employ these investigative methods: production orders and inspection orders to get the bank accounts for all of the accused persons, to get the phone records for the accused persons, search warrants, covert operations, and that led to over 70 statements being recorded. Now we got statements from the National Land Agency, the Registrar of Companies, National Insurance Scheme, TAJ, financial records, handwriting experts, and much more, because of the three C's. Now, on June 24th, 2016, the joint operation was conducted at the home of Sanjay Elliott and the Manchester Parish Council. The operations resulted in the seizure of the following items: thousands of Manchester Parish Council, and we'll call it MPC, documents, including payment vouchers, invoices, checks spanning the period 2013 to June 2016 were seized. Disbursement logs, communiques, etc. Now, his house was also searched, that is Mr. Elliott. We uncovered large quantities of MPC documents. In the kitchen, you found large quantity of payment vouchers and MPC invoices. When Mr. Sibley's room was searched, you found MPC check stubs in various names. This is their homes we're talking about, not at the parish council. Substantial sums of cash were found in their homes. Receipts, credit card statements, motor vehicle titles, land titles recovered from Mr. Elliott's vehicle, 10 uncashed MPC checks again, in the names of several contractors, plus receipt books. So you see how involved this matter was and how technical clearly the evidence was going to be. And Channa will speak about that. Now, I already spoke about the evidence gathering tools, so I will not delve into that. So the investigation actually led to the laying of over 200 information. And that is really basically charges, for those who may not understand, against all of these persons, and you see their names there. So we charge them for uttering forged documents, forgery, conspiracy to defraud, obtaining money by means of false pretenses, breaches of the Corruption Prevention Act, facilitating the retention of criminal property, possession of criminal property, and engaging in a transaction involving criminal property. Now, these latter charges, the three latter charges that you see here are actually money laundering charges. So these are charges under the POCA, the Proceedings of Crime Act. Now, I'm going to highlight why it is so important for the 3 C's, the cooperation, the collaboration, and communication, and pay attention to these dates. Now, in June 29, 2016, the matter first came before the Corporate Area Criminal Court. In the same month, it was transferred to the Manchester Parish Court. The following month, the matter was first mentioned before the Parish Court, and the matter was joined. Now, prior to the ODPP's, that is our office, intervention, there were at least 20 mentioned dates. Now, we joined the investigation or the proceedings in June 4, 2018, when MOC and FID asked us to come on board. You realize those dates? June 29, 2016, June 4th, 2018. That is 2 years later. And when we were asked to intervene, there were several items that were still outstanding. We didn't have the financial forensic report, the digital forensic report, chain of custody statements, some of the financial records, some of the 31G certificates, further statements. It was woefully incomplete. But I must say that since this matter, we have definitely improved. For most matters, we are actually involved from the very inception of the matters. And it's mainly because of this particular matter. So we did learn a lot of things. But you see why it is important for everybody to be on board. Remember that every entity has a different expertise. And the reality is we are the ones prosecuting the matter. So you have to get us involved from the very beginning. So when Crown Counsel appeared in court, we had to ask for an adjournment. Now, usually in the parish court, it's the clerk of courts who would deal with these matters or prosecute these matters. But because this particular matter, it was shown that the parish council was defrauded of about in excess of 400 million Jamaican dollars. So, of course, the matter was voluminous, it was complex, and there was a high public interest because it involved government officials. So that is why we had to come on board at the DPP's office. And as a matter of fact, when we arrived in court, we realized that it was actually set for trial for the money laundering offenses only. And we had to say, no. We need an adjournment. We need some more time. We want it to be all of the offenses to be tried together. And when these offenses are tried together, of course, our case is stronger. Now, the operations of the scheme. The cost of debushing, water chucking, road patching, draining cleaning, and beautification. So between 2013 and June 2016, as I said before, the parish council was defrauded of over $400 million. So this was facilitated through a scheme which involved the creation of fraudulent supplier invoices. So when these fraudulent supplier invoices were created, thereafter, they prepared a preparation of internal Manchester Parish Council invoices and then payment vouchers from which the MPC checks were generated in the names of these purported suppliers and contractors. And then when these checks were encashed, the proceeds now went back to Mr. Elliott and the other accused persons. So the scope of the fraud involved debushing and beautification of various roadways, supply and delivery of portable water, patching of roadways, and draining cleaning. But did these activities actually occur? No. But yet you had supplier invoices from these so-called contractors. And remember how it started. It started because someone complained or realized that Mr. Elliott was living a particular lifestyle compared to what he should be earning as an employee at the parish council. So the suppliers or purported contractors fell into the following categories. Some of them did not work for the Manchester Parish Council as described in the invoices. Yet, payment vouchers had their names. Some of them had previously worked for the council, but they were owed no money. But they received checks in their names for work that were not actually done. In almost all cases, the purported contractors had not submitted contractor invoices at all, but they were paid, quote unquote. In almost all cases, the contractors did not sign the signature appearing on the external invoices. And in many cases, checks were prepared in suppliers' name who knew nothing about them and were subsequently cashed by a third party, unbeknownst to them. And this evidence was borne out in court. Now, these were the persons who were involved in the trial, or the trial was against. So you have Mr. Elliott, who we deem to be the mastermind. And he was the program manager. And his position was the deputy superintendent for road and works and the acting superintendent at one point. And he certified invoices and payment vouchers. So this here is what Ms. Llewellyn referred to really as the professional incest. So David Harris was a co-conspirator. He was a secretary or manager, CEO, director of finance. He signed MPC invoices, payment vouchers, and checks. Mr. Roberts, he was a temporary work overseer. Scope and estimated work to be conducted, verified work performed. Dwayne Sibley's, he resided at Mr. Elliott's home and served as his gardener. But he was the intermediary in the scheme. He was the one encashing checks. Remember, these are the checks said to be from the parish council. But he was the gardener. Now, Mr. McLean was a teller. He processed the encashment of several checks. Mrs. Goldburn Elliott, the wife of Mr. Elliott, and you had Myrtle Elliott and Elwardo Elliott. So under the Act, Mr. Elliott had a very important role, and he had autonomy to approve sums below $500,000. So his role was in the criminal enterprise was to solicit purported contractors. So he provided the names and a TRN to Mr. Roberts and Mr. Harris to facilitate the creation of invoices and vouchers. He authorized the creation and processing of the fictitious documents. He was the one who contacted and provided checks to the contractors with instructions to cash them and return the proceeds to him or his intermediary. He collected the proceeds from the checks. And you hear me saying proceeds and proceeds. That's where the money laundering aspects came in. And arbitrarily directed the amounts of monies to be made payable. Mr. Harris, and I'll just talk about his role in the enterprise, he knowingly facilitated and approved the creation of the documents. He certified the invoices, payment vouchers, checks drawn in names of purported contractors. He arbitrarily provided names and amounts to be paid out to purported contractors in furtherance of the criminal enterprise. Mr. Roberts, he also certified the work that was so-called done, and the MPC invoices in cases where the contractors say they perform no work or cause it to be done. He facilitated the creation of the invoices. He induced the council, let me go again, he induced the council, that's the parish council, to process and pay out monies in furtherance of the fraudulent documents. And he failed to meet the contractor to measure the scope of the work and negotiate the rate or estimates, and this was all borne out in the court. And you see why the conviction was successful. Now, Mr. Sibley's, as I said before, the gardener, was the one who encashed the checks. And Mr. McLean, we allege that Mr. McLean failed to verify the checks, breached banking protocols, and facilitated the checks. Now we're going to go into the juicy part of the actual prosecution. And I'll turn over to Ms. Ormsby at this time.
The green one, no? This one? Okay. Morning, everyone. So, how is it that this scheme was able to be carried out? So, Ms. Steele would have given you the background in terms of the role of each individual. So here we have presented by way of illustration how the scheme was meant to operate. So at top you will see Mr. Elliott, the mastermind. And below him is Miss, for example, Melissa McFarlane. Now she was one of the purported contractors to the council, never employed to the council, had never in her life performed any services for the council. In fact, she met Mr. Elliott. I believe she operated at the time, based on the evidence, she operated an ice cream store, and he somehow visited the location and struck up a conversation with her. And they started to communicate. And her evidence is that one day he asked her for her TRN, which she sent to him via WhatsApp messages. And what became of that? He then proceeded to use that information, in addition to her name, to have documents generated in her name. Can you imagine? And she went as far as to say that she was aware of only one transaction, that being, he had called her and said to her, you know, someone is to be paid, but that person can't read. The person is illiterate, and so can you allow for a check to go into your name just to help out the person, right? And this was, I believe, 300,000 Jamaican dollars. And she agreed unwittingly, I would say, unknowing at that time. Check went in her name. She collected the check. It was Mr. Sibley's who brought the check to her in that instance. And she encashed the check, and she gave the proceeds to Mr. Sibley's, who then took it to Mr. Elliott. Now, what is alarming in relation to Ms. McFarlane, as the evidence was unearthed, and she gave her evidence, there were numerous parish council invoices, payment vouchers, checks, which were generated in her name that she knew nothing of. And when we say she knew nothing of it, this was confirmed by handwriting analysis. So outside of her saying, you know, when I look at the check, the endorsement on the check, and when I look at the payment vouchers, I see my name, I see my TRN, I see my address, but the signature does not belong to me. It's not mine, right? And I recall, indeed, in her evidence, she was one of the witnesses who broke down and had to be consoled, had to take a moment, because when she saw the extent of the criminality that was being performed in her name, you know, she was shocked, to say the least. And so the scheme in terms of how it operates, Mr. Elliott transmitted her TRN to Mr. Roberts, who was the overseer. So as Ms. Steele indicated, he was the person who would have been responsible to go out in the field and to verify that these works that is said to have been done were in fact done. And that was never the case. So he certified these documents, which then led to a trail where it goes to the account department, where Mrs. Smith prepared those invoices now, which is then sent over for signature, whether by Mr. Elliott or Mr. Harris, right? And then the monies were then passed, checks prepared, and so on and so forth. Now, teller number 9, we will get to him during the course of the presentation because, you know, you might have some questions and you might wonder why it is that he was not convicted, but we will treat with it as we get there. So this is just by way of illustration, another example in terms of another witness who gave evidence in terms of how he was used in the process to help perpetrate the fraud that was done against the parish council. So I won't delay in respect of these. Another example. Now, Natasha Heron is significant because how the scheme operated, Mr. Elliott sought to befriend individuals. Some of them, by their very appearance in court, you could see how they could have been manipulated. And so he obtained their information, and then he just perpetrated a trail of fraudulent activities in relation to the council. And we go along. Now, we spoke a little bit about the full extent of the sum. And for those persons who followed the trial during the course of it, there was much debate as it relates to what was the quantum. Now, the indictment captured all the offenses Ms. Steele spoke about earlier, so I'm not going to delay. Now, in totality, we called 49 witnesses. This was an indictment that really contained over 60 witnesses, but we were strategic in terms of how we presented the evidence. And so we utilized the different provisions in the Evidence Amendment Act. So some witnesses came by way of intention, notice of intention, where we didn't have to physically ask them to appear in court. So some of the witnesses from the financial institutions, for example. But in total, we called 49 persons who gave Viva Voucher evidence, who testified, in other words, in court. And a significant portion of these witnesses were really financial institutions, the expertise, the handwriting expert, the quantity surveyors. And I tell you, audience, in a case where you had so many players in terms of the regular citizen who participated in this scheme, what we had at trial were only about 8 or 9 witnesses, contractors, who came forward and gave evidence, out of perhaps 15 or 20 who had given statement to investigators. And this is very instructive because in our assessment, and we will get to it, the matter suffered in terms of persons who absented themselves from the proceedings. And that is one of the challenges we have as prosecutors. When matters are investigated, resources are poured into it, and we get at the trial stage, and we have no one or 2 people presenting to assist us in mounting that prosecution to get a conviction. And so that was one of the issues we had in this matter, and we will treat with it if we can get there, because this is not a presentation that can be done in 50 minutes, but we'll get there. Now, the quantum I alluded to earlier, we did not seek to place on the indictment in excess of 400 million, but was it grounded? Why didn't we do that? We took that decision, again, because of witnesses who absented themselves. So very quickly, we realized that we would have had a challenge. At the commencement of the trial, can I tell you, there were witnesses who bought tickets, who left the jurisdiction. There were witnesses who went into hiding. We had a team from MOCA and FID out in the fields trying to find these individuals, because cases cannot be proved without witnesses in some circumstances. And so, to your right or left, is it? Where you see that blue boxes, those blue boxes, and look at the figures. In one case, DS, which is an individual, 44 million Jamaican dollars. And these are monies that were, obtained in very short periods. So even though we're talking about 2014 to 2016, some of these sums were not even acquired over the entire period, in short period. But DS did not make himself available. RC, RJ, MB, not in sight. Yes? And one of the limitations in relation to even utilizing their statement, having it tendered into evidence, given that they're absent, is that because of the voluminous nature of the matter, the several documents that were generated in their names, and because of strategy, the investigating officers weren't able to put every single document to them and to have it captured in a statement detailing, saying, oh, I didn't sign, I don't know about it. So that was a limitation. We weren't able to say, okay, let us tender the statement given that they're absent. So you see the scope of it. Now I'm just going to move along. Ms. Steele did an excellent job in summarizing how the fraud operated, and so I will move along and get to the evidence of it. Now, in looking at the evidence and what was presented, we sought to do much of it by way of illustration. Yes? So when we presented the evidence to the court, let me see if I've gone too far. Just give me a minute here, go back. I may have gone too far. All right. So in presenting the evidence, what we, Mr. Can I get some assistance? Right? Oh, go back. All right. These devices, sometimes they just don't work with me. All right. So we're going back. All right. Because this is the juicy part of it. All right. So we spoke about them conveying their TRNs, their names to Mr. Elliott. In terms of leading the evidence, when documents were shown to them, they said, I did not perform the work described therein. This is not my signature. I was never contracted to do these works. In fact, one witness said when he saw the location where the works were carried out, he said, I've never gone there. I don't even know the area. I don't own a water truck to be delivering portable water. Yes? We had, for example, the superintendent of water who gave evidence to say, listen, we do not engage female to truck water. Yes? We have a prescribed list of individuals who are certified to do water delivery. But when you look at the documentation, you saw water delivery for Miss Heron, Miss McFarlane. Yes? And they're like, I don't own any water truck. I never caused anybody to deliver water. Where is this location? I don't know. Yes? So it was quite striking. Yes? Blatant in the face of the evidence. And so in demonstrating the scope of our evidence, in presenting it to the court, we did it by way of illustration. Because nothing beats picture. Yes? And so we have exhibit, we put the check number, we put the date, the voucher number, the division, and the witnesses are saying, Alligator Pond, where is that? Yes? And we put the figure. Now look at the final column where it says teller number 9. You see the consistency? And this is the person who was charged. And this is just a snapshot of the figures. This is just a snapshot for illustration. Now, similarly, now if you look at the dates when the checks are generated, not very far apart. Now ask yourself, when you say, for example, debushing in Porous, what acreage are we talking about? What is the scope of the work? Yes, for someone to be paid $450,000 in one instance. Now that would have been the responsibility of Mr. Roberts to verify it. But when we look at it and when we matched it against what would have been the legitimate work, so you are contracted by the council to do debushing. The scope of your work is measured and quantified. When we match what would have ordinarily be legitimate work, we find figures like $20,000, $25,000, $30,000, $35,000. never 400,000, never 375. So you saw a trend that these were all the fraudulent works that were being conducted. No. In presenting the evidence, what we saw, up to the point when Mr. Elliott was arrested on the 24th of June, is bank account and investment, that he had amassed 63 million. Yes? Then we saw where the large cash deposits that he made to his accounts, and primarily 4 of them at 4 financial institutions, over 48 million Jamaican dollars. And what was again instructive is that the sums that were going into these accounts were always consistent. And when you match it with what was being drawn on the check, you saw a pattern. You saw a particular pattern, similar amounts. Yes? Now, when he was arrested, between that period and September of 2016, he was able to dissipate the accounts by over 14 million in that short window. So police investigators swooping on him, between himself and his wife and other relatives, he was able to deplete the account by over 14 million Jamaican dollars. Yes? Evidence. So, he was engaged in purchasing bonds, euro bonds. Yes? He invested in government paper, $10 million, 2.3. And look at the dates, because it is going to become very significant. Yes? Transfer from one institution, $7 million. And this one is instructive too, because this transaction broke certain requirements, regulatory requirements that were not checked. Now, remember I told you about the monies going in. So what you saw, he had several active accounts with substantial balances. Now look at the trend, right? Then he had changes in static bank balances, which before he became deputy superintendent, I should have said this to you, he came up through the council. In fact, he went there as I believe it was a worker during the summer period. And he was retained until he worked his way right up to deputy superintendent. And the moment he became deputy superintendent, that is when his pocket started getting very fat, if I can say. Yes? And so what you see is vast amounts of monies being deposited to his account. Look at the dates. 21st of March, 28, 2 transactions. You seen it? And then when you go down, you see that he's spreading it across the account. What is that? He's trying to ensure that it is not detected. So he's spreading it across his accounts, right? Similar pattern. 500,000, 800,000. Now, where did this money come from? No. Substantial real estate portfolio. Between 2011 2012, he purchased the lot on which he built. This is not the mansion. It's really more, palatious. 2.5 million he purchased that lot for, that the mansion was built on. Yes? And he constructed the house at Daly's Grove for between 70 to 80 million Jamaican dollars. It was estimated to value at trial. Then you see where he was literally trying to buy out the entire parish. He purchased land in Knockpatrick, and Catalia Court is actually named after his daughter. And so you see the cost there between 115 million to 125 million. And this was a 12, what do you call it? 12 apartments. And you saw where he was purchasing land, I guess, to continue to build more apartments, Director? Yes, an empire. And importantly, it was not commensurate with his income, his known income. So he couldn't get out of it. Yes? Not commensurate, no other traceable, identifiable income was unearthed by the investigators. Yes? You see where between April 2015 and June 2016, he expended over $13 million in cash payment. In cash payment for construction labor costs. And guess what? You see this blue book? It's actually an exhibit in the trial because he documented his activities. Can you imagine? He documented his activities. So when we tendered the blue book, Mr. What's his name? Mr. McFarlane. Is it McFarlane? One of the witnesses, not recalling the name now, was able to look, and his name was there to say that he had been paid $750,000. He was a welder and had worked at the premises for him. Yes? And his lifestyle was quite lavish, as Ms. Steele indicated. Can you imagine purchasing drapery for $750,000? Who does that? Well, I mean, not me. We're public servants. Yes. We're public servants. $750,000. And millions on furniture. He had a jacuzzi outdoor. A spa. Yes. And so what we sought to do was again to demonstrate to the court that we are not just saying these things, we can prove it. And so again, this is what is supposed to be a source of income, is employment history, yes? And look for yourself. What do you see there? So his salary, when he commenced at the council, $810, $900 for the year per annum, divided by 12. Yes? So by December 2011, when he had assumed the position of deputy superintendent, his salary grew a little. But even, you know, a public service, it's not much. We're grateful though. $1.7 million. Do the calculation again. By our calculation, it's about 140,000 Jamaican dollars per month. Yes? So over the entire period, 8.5 years, his income lawfully was 14 million Jamaican dollars. You remember what we dealt with earlier? Now, when the know your customer requirement for the regulators who are here, very important, because it becomes very instrumental when we present our evidence. So when he would have gone to the entities to open an account, he told them my salary would be 40 to 80,000, yes, per month. I am likely to save $10,000 per month based on what I am earning. Yes, no additional income, he told one entity. Then he told another, oh, I'm engaged in buying and selling cars. Not borne out, but we will get to that. Now, Director and my colleague, Ms. Steele, also spoke about the different investigative tools. Very important. So when we got records from Tax Administration Jamaica and NIS and the Register of Companies, what it showed to us was really, Mr. Elliott had no other returns, whether self-employed, he didn't have any companies, he wasn't any director in any companies, no shareholder, so there was no other source of income, right? Filed in respect of him. He claimed that he bought and sold motor vehicles. Nothing. In fact, one of the investigating officers, Detective Corporal Parnell, don't think he's in the room, Fabian Parnell from the FID, he went and he scouted out all of Mandeville to see if he could get any record of Mr. Elliott having any business, buying and selling car, any car mart. Nothing, nil. He claimed he was a draftsman. Register of Architects, no record of him registering anything, no membership, no pending application, no record at the council to say that he had done any drawings or buildings, nothing, right? And we spoke about the book earlier, so this is just depicting that he, you know, made these documents, payments in the names of these individuals, and when you trace it, you saw where the receipt book showed where the monies were being paid out. So the checks coming in, the proceeds from the checks coming in, and they're being paid out in plumbing work, casting, fabrication. So we were able to trace it and to say, look, inescapable inference that this is where the money is coming from. This is what he's utilizing it to do. He's engaged in criminal conduct. One of the things we found, his salary went to an account at BNS, untouched. He didn't touch it. And may I share something with you? You know, for those of us who we have to survive on the government salary, so you might have a Magna card and you go point of sale and you get your reward. And at the end of the year, they send you a little check, maybe $2,000 or $1,000. The investigators discovered in his home, Mr. Elliott, several Magna vouchers with large amount. It just goes to show how much he was spending, right? So that his reward was not my $2,000, right? Then the lavish lifestyle, Neiman Marcus, Louis Vuitton, Perry Ellis, just a few. Then what he did, he preloaded his credit card. So again, you will see $800,900 going onto his credit card. And then he utilized it in spending. I believe we were able to locate a credit card statement that was over 30 million in spending, right? And Ms. Steele spoke about cash which was seized at his house. Now, let me tell you, Mr. Elliott was operating a mini parish council from his house. You heard documents found in the kitchen, bedroom. He had a cash machine there. Yes, to count the cash. He had a safe. When FID went in, they were able to seize the cash. And he was what? 31 years old at the time of his arrest. 31 years old. 31 years, what you had when you were 31? 31 years old. Yes? Now, you see how the evidence coming together? Motor vehicles, Do you see no lien, no credit facility? And just by way of background, the investigators learned of a brand new BMW X6, custom made, that was supposed to be coming in, but he got wind of it. And so he was able to intercept what was happening there and stop it. So we didn't get to hold on to that. Yes? Now, let me go back a little. One of the things that he employed in the scheme, 5 minutes, wow, is that he concealed some of the vehicles in some of the witnesses' names. So one particular witness, I should say, who, when proceedings were going on at the Supreme Court, the witness showed up and said, listen, he just asked me to put these 2 vehicles in my name. They're not mine. And that witness came to court and gave evidence. Yes? Now, let me go a little faster. So we were able to present digital forensic evidence in the form of WhatsApp messages, and this was instrumental in terms of the count for conspiracy to defraud, because what it demonstrated was the players, Mr. Harris, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Roberts. Yes? Because you know circumstantial evidence, and you want to ensure that you tie up everything. So we were able to use the messages to say, listen, they are not talking about $50 to go buy, what? Well, they can't buy patty with that anymore. What they were talking about is 50,000. Yes? And so, spoke about the large quantity of check stubs in the various names. Mr. Sibley's, when he was cautioned, he said, these are for contractors and I changed them for them. Check drawn in your name, and he's presenting it at the bank to change it for you without your knowledge. Yes? And I'm gonna go a little faster. Tracing the money laundering part of it. Very important, because all of the evidence has presented is to get to the point that what? This is criminal conduct. This is a criminal lifestyle that he was engaged in. And all that we presented were the benefit he garnered from this criminal lifestyle. Yes? And it is criminal property that ought to be taken away from him. Yes? And I'm going to have to go over it a little, but I spoke mostly about Mr. Elliott. But in relation to this aspect of it, his wife was also convicted for facilitating the retention of criminal property. And just to touch on her a little in summary, Mrs. Goldburn Elliott was a student, a housewife. She was attending the University of the West Indies, was never employed, yes? She was the beneficiary of this lavish lifestyle. She would go to the trips with him in Bahamas, that famous place, Atlantis, yes? She was a part of the spending. Is it that she did not know, or did she just shut her eyes? Willful blindness, that's a term. And so the court found that she, in all her conduct and lack thereof, that she was willfully blind and she was a participant in the scheme. And so she was also found. There's more to her, but time is of the essence, so I have to move on. The teller, I think it is important to speak about the teller a little, and I know I've been given the time warning. But was his conduct just negligible, or was it calculated? Yes? when you look at this diagram, and this is just a portion, we spoke about breach of the protocols that obtained at the financial institution in question. And they came and they gave evidence. Now, he was released from that location. Yes? We weren't told why. We suspect. But when you look at it, no ID noted on the back of the check. Forged signature. 169, where the accused man, Mr. Sibley's, went into the bank with a check drawn in the name of Mr. Merchant, and he presented that check. And you know what he did? In endorsing the check, he wrote what? Remember, the check is drawn in the name of Merchant, the payee. You know what he wrote? D. Sibley's. So he wrote his signature in encashing a check drawn in a third party's name, and the teller accepted it. Yes? And when you look at the trend, we found that a lot of the transactions were conducted by this teller. Now, this is someone who is educated. Mr. McLean was someone who had gotten several awards from the bank for efficiency and all these other goodies. Yes? But the court found that we needed more. Perhaps the court was looking for some communication, other form of interaction. So I say this to say, investigators, and this is not to fault our team because they did what they needed to have done. We have to dig deep to get to the persons in the bank. We have to dig. It's almost like it has to be in black and white, or else the court is not going to say guilty. Yes? And so this is a breakdown of the different convictions, right? So we were able to get save and except for the parents and the teller. And the parents was really a situation where we had the apartment in the name of the father and Mr. Elliott, the mother, her name being a joint holder in terms of the house at Daly's Grove. And so we needed more, but the fact of the matter is when you see property, real or personal, you can't charge one person. Once there's a joint holder, you have to get everybody and let it play out as it may, right? And so these were the outcome of the trial. Now, for those of us who listened to the verdict and the summation, you would recall that now Her Ladyship Granger indicated that her hands were tied in relation to how much sentence she could give, how many years. Yes? Because when a matter like this is tried in the parish court, there's a jurisdiction issue in terms of sentencing, a limitation, which was one of the drawbacks in this matter. Because really and truly, a scheme like this, how much you think he should have gotten? I think so too. Yes. Now, pitfalls and lessons learned. We have itemized them there, and the director spoke about the issue of disclosure and what unfolded in relation to that. In fact, we had to call the director, who came and gave us support on multiple occasions. When the issue of disclosure came up, she had to come with her broad back and testicular fortitude. Yes? To hold up the team, literally. Yes? To shore us up. And so, witness management, we spoke about persons absenting themselves from the proceeding. Yes? Tempers frayed. I can tell you, we had to demonstrate, you know, prosecutors are held at a higher standard. We had to demonstrate prosecutorial restraint in these proceedings. When I tell you gutter behavior, and you have to compose and contain. You're on your feet and you hear certain insults. That is mild, Director. And you just have to remember that, you have to do what you have to do. Keep focus. Much of that went on in this trial. I say, if we had the benefit of a stenographer, the public would really know what's happening, what went down. Yes? In this matter. And then the photograph is actually real. There was an episode, some of you may recall, where a section of the court, a particular section of the court was set ablaze, but luckily for us, we had the exhibits.
Only trust yourself.
Only trust yourself, I'm being reminded by learned director. Yes, and so shattering of the courtroom window. I find this one quite telling because it was at a point when a particular witness who was not cooperating was given evidence. And as she told the lies, God decided to intervene. And the window, we just saw it coming down. We joke about it but in the moment, we're on our feet and we're leading the evidence and she's up there telling the lies and we were about to treat her hostile director. And then we said, you know what's the value of doing that? We have what we need really from others. But then God said, okay, I'm going to show you. You held up the Bible and you took an oath. And you're here lying about it. And the glass just shattered. She was uninjured except for a little, scrapes. But we had to break for a while. We took an adjournment. Yes? And there are other things. Some of you might have questions. Limited absence of an audit. I spoke to Ms. Llewellyn about this one, and it is important. Yes, this was one of the downfall in terms of the matter. Absence of an audit report. Yes, but as my colleague said earlier, Ms. Steele, this matter, I believe, has presented much learning. Yes, much learning. And we have had greater collaboration. The director is being contacted earlier now in relation to matters, and so we can work with the investigators to point them in the direction, because at the end of the day, we have to lead the evidence, and without it, we don't have a conviction. So the matter is being appealed. In fact, Director, I see it on the agenda for February. Yes, and we are optimistic, based on how we conducted the prosecution, that the convictions will be upheld. Yes, so commendations to the team from MOCA, FID, OCG now, Integrity Commission, for the exemplary work that they did in terms of investigating this matter. 1 minute, yes! In terms of investigating this matter, and bringing it to light. Yes, and we commend them, and we encourage you to continue to utilize the tools available to you under the legislation. And when in doubt, the DPP's office we will always make ourselves available to you. Yes? So commendations to all the persons involved in respect of this matter, and thank you. And to the prosecutors. Thank you.